He's loitering near a federal zone. No ID, no address, no service record, the officer said coldly. The old man didn't resist. His face was hollow and worn, one prosthetic leg stiff, boots untied. He stooped to pick up his faded patrol cap, dusted it off, and said quietly, "I'm not asking for anything, just honoring what's still left of me." Then the courtroom doors opened. A man in full military uniform stepped in, his voice steady and low. "This man isn't who you think he is. Who is this old man, and why would someone from the military come here for him? In person?" Raymond Walker sat quietly on a low concrete ledge near the federal building's side entrance. His coat, a faded olive green military issue, hung loose on his thin frame. One leg, artificial from the knee down, stuck out stiffly as he leaned forward to tie his worn boot with slow, careful fingers. His hat, a sun-bleached patrol cap, rested slightly askew, like a memory someone left in a drawer too long. He moved with purpose, not aimlessness, collecting plastic bottles into a canvas bag, pausing only to nod politely when a child looked his way. He rarely spoke, but his silence wasn't empty. It carried weight. Raymond had become part of the landscape familiar, but overlooked. Some locals recognized him. A few offered coffee or sandwiches. Most passed by without a glance. He slept near the library when it didn't rain, or under the bus shelter when it did. No fixed address, no VA benefits, no ID. Officially, he didn't exist. The system had misfiled him, then forgotten him altogether. But those who looked closely noticed something unusual the way he stood still, like he was waiting for something or someone. Not lost, not begging, just there, in quiet defiance of being erased. A college volunteer once stopped and asked, cautiously, "Were you in the service?" Sir Raymond had nodded faintly. "A long time ago." Then, almost as if to himself, he added, "Most of my brothers didn't make it back. I did. That's the story." He never talked about medals, but an old scar just under his collar hinted at fire. Shrapnel. Something buried deep. Some say he once served in a covert unit, special operations, but no records exist. No photos. Only that patch on his coat, barely visible now, shaped like a silver eagle mid-dive. He chose silence, maybe to protect others, maybe because no one listened anymore. It happened quietly. Raymond stood too close to the restricted side entrance of the federal complex. According to the posted signs, a security officer asked him to leave. He didn't argue, he only said, "I'm not asking for anything, just waiting for the morning light." But he had no ID, no address, no listed emergency contact. They called the city police. "He's loitering. No documentation. Could be a threat," the officer said flatly. He didn't resist as they cuffed him. Before stepping into the cruiser, he bent down and gently picked up his cap. He dusted it off and said nothing. Inside the precinct, Colonel Eric Monroe paused mid-step as he caught sight of the man in the holding cell. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks, but then he saw the patch barely visible on the tattered coat, an eagle in a downward dive. He stepped forward. "Sergeant." "Raymond Walker." Walker didn't respond immediately. He just stared, expression unreadable. Then, quietly, almost like testing a memory, left shoulder, took a piece of mortar. "You bled for 3 minutes before passing out." Monroe froze. "You dragged me out. Everyone else was down. You survived. That's what matters," Walker said, as if it meant little. But Monroe knew better. The man in front of him had saved his life and disappeared. Clara Jensen had handled plenty of difficult cases, but this one gnawed at her. She'd agreed to take Raymond's case pro bono, more out of instinct than logic. Something about the way he sat still, proud, and forgotten bothered her. She requested his military and medical records from the VA. The response came back, "No file found." She dug deeper. Social Security, nothing. service discharge missing, disability status unlisted. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a clean wipe. She stared at the empty digital report and whispered to herself, someone didn't just forget him, they erased him. And the question that followed chilled her. Who had the power to do that and why? It was an intern at the local news station who stumbled across the footage, grainy, archived, almost forgotten. A military awards ceremony from over 20 years ago. A name was mentioned once, Sergeant First Class Raymond J. Walker, but the man receiving the medal wasn't facing the camera, and he never accepted it. According to the record, he declined all public honors. No press, no family notice. His reason, operational security. My team's safety comes first. The medal, the Distinguished Service Cross, was one of the highest possible. When Clara showed the clip to Monroe, his jaw tightened. They tried to give him a stage. He asked for silence. Online forums started picking it up. A Reddit thread titled "The Vanishing Hero" began trending. In a quiet moment outside the precinct, Monroe sat across from Clara. You know why this matters to me? He asked. She waited. 14 years ago, my wife went into premature labor at a forward operating base. We had no blood units. The only match was a soldier from another unit who volunteered, no questions asked. He looked toward the cell window, voice low. It was Raymond Walker. He saved my son's life. I never even knew his name until today. Clara looked stunned. That's more than loyalty. That's debt, Monroe said. A quiet one, and I plan to repay it. Inside the courtroom, everything felt too quiet. When asked if he had anything to say before formal charges were read, Raymond stood. His back was straight despite the limp. I was asked to clear a village once. Civilians, women, children. Intel said there were hostiles, but I saw none. He paused. I refused the order. They said I disobeyed command. I said I was following something higher. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. I didn't lose my leg in combat. I lost it in the fallout after. From across the aisle, Police Chief Roland Mitchell leaned forward, his voice full of disdain. So you're saying you're some kind of moral martyr? Raymond didn't flinch? I'm saying I didn't pull the trigger when I knew I shouldn't. Mitchell scoffed. Men like you come back with stories and think they're owed something? Walker looked him in the eye. I don't want anything, but if I disappear quietly, so will everyone like me. The room shifted, still not convinced, but no longer certain. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. General Alexander Graves entered in full uniform, silver stars glinting under the overhead lights. Every officer in the room stood instinctively. He walked straight to the bench, handed over a thick file, then turned to the judge. Sergeant Raymond Walker was part of Bravo 7, a classified unit operating beyond standard protocol. His actions saved lives, mine included. Gasps broke out. He was erased not for dishonor, but because someone wanted to bury their own guilt. Now, the silence wasn't confusion. It was shame. General Graves faced the courtroom, his voice calm but cutting. There was a cover-up. Raymond Walker's refusal to carry out an unlawful order led to an internal inquiry that never saw daylight. Those who tried to protect him were reassigned. Those who didn't were promoted. He paused, letting the weight sink in. I signed the final report myself, redacted, on orders from above. He turned toward Walker. Today, I make that wrong right, officially and without apology. Walker didn't smile, but his eyes lifted for the first time. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown. News outlets swarmed. Protest signs rose. Heroes deserve better. Justice for Walker. He saved us. Who saved him? A live stream clip of Walker's testimony hit social media within hours. Race, valor, and justice for Walker trended globally. Veterans began coming forward. Stories, names, patterns. Clara stared at her phone, stunned. This isn't about just one man, she said. This is the tip of a graveyard. Monroe nodded beside her. They buried stories like his so deep, they thought no one would ever come looking. That evening, Colonel Monroe met Walker outside the courthouse. You didn't have to do it, Monroe said quietly. Speak. Reveal all that, Walker replied. Someone had to start the unburying. A pause. Then you think it'll change anything? Monroe asked. Walker looked at the crowd across the street, young people holding signs, veterans saluting him as they passed. It already did. No bravado, just truth. And this time, no one was turning away. Police Chief Roland Mitchell stood before the press, eyes tired, voice subdued. I enforce the law as written, he began. But sometimes the law isn't written for people like Sergeant Walker. He paused, swallowing hard. I apologize to him and to every veteran who's been treated as disposable. Detective Travis Kent, the arresting officer, stood behind him in silence. Later that day, a video circulated Kent walking up to Walker in civilian clothes, removing his cap and offering a handshake. Walker took it, briefly, without a word. Some things didn't need one. After the story aired nationwide, a woman knocked on the shelter door where Walker had been taken for temporary housing. She held a yellowed photograph, 2 children and a younger Walker, smiling, uniform still crisp. Ray, she whispered. It was Lena Walker, his sister. She had spent years thinking he'd died overseas. He stepped out slowly. For a moment, he said nothing, just looked at her like he was counting years backward. Then he opened his arms. The reunion was quiet. Just here, and her voice repeating one line, You came back. You finally came back. General Graves held a press conference on behalf of the Department of Defense. We cannot undo what was buried, but we can bring it into the light. He announced the full restoration of Walker's military honors and benefits, along with a federal review of similar erased cases. Raymond Walker was given a permanent residence at a veterans center, his own name now listed with full rank and honors. A plaque bearing his name was installed in the Hall of Service. For the first time in decades, Raymond Walker stood beneath a roof that called him home. The story didn't fade. Within days, investigative journalists uncovered dozens of similar cases, soldiers lost in paperwork, their records purged, their sacrifices forgotten. A congressional hearing was called, testimonies rolled in, hashtags like RDU Erase Valor and Honor Them All flooded every major platform. Veterans across the country stood in front of courthouses holding up Walker's photo, not in protest but in solidarity. He never asked for it. But sometimes, the quietest man in the room starts the loudest conversation. Raymond watched the news from a quiet bench outside the VA clinic, the screen flickering in the reflection of his coffee. He didn't smile, but he stayed until the broadcast ended. On Veterans Day, Raymond Walker was invited to speak at Arlington. He didn't wear a full uniform, just the same faded coat and cap. Clean now, but still worn, the way he liked it. He stood behind the podium, paused long enough that the silence felt ceremonial, then spoke just 12 words. We serve. We're forgotten, but we don't stop being worth remembering. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood. Even the officials, even the ones who once turned their backs. Later that afternoon, a little boy approached him at the memorial wall. Are you a real hero? The boy asked. Raymond knelt slowly, so they were eye to eye. A hero, he said gently, is just someone who keeps their soul when the world tries to take it. The boy didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. And as Raymond stood and walked away, wind brushing his coat, his silhouette moved like a memory between flags. Some stories fade, but this one stayed.